Welcome to Monk Brews Audio with me, Ravanuj Kashyap. And apologies for being away for quite some time on my channel, as well as those of you who regularly read my articles on Reddit. I had been preoccupied with some work, and as well as I fell sick quite a few times this month. So this kind of slowed down my pipeline. But anyway, here I am with another IEM that I have been meaning to cover for quite some time because it has been requested by a few of my regular readers as well as other people in the community that I maintain on Discord. And finally, I have managed to get a hold of this IEM. And believe me when I say this, a lot of IEMs in that price range still cannot nail the fundamentals right. And this IEM does cover a lot of the fundamentals as well as add extra flavor on top of sorts. So in this segment, we'll know the good, the bad, and the ugly about the Aful P5+2. Really? P7. So let's move on to the unboxing. So this is the retail unboxing experience of the Aful P5+2 or the P7. I have the IEMs outside already. Just let me give you a quick rundown. The lid, when you slide it off, it'll give way to the main box that's inside. Just let me pull it out once. So once this is done, you can see what's inside, and this is the whole Aful branded padding. Then this is some earphone usage guidelines and an instruction manual. You'll find the shells here otherwise, and it also comes in a nice metal circular carry case with some foam packaging, which is very nice. And when you slide this out, these would be the ear tips that Aful comes with. And these, let me show you. These are called the Aful Salt ear tips, which are their own aftermarket. And I got to know about this quite recently. So if you are in search of the ear tips of these ones, let me pull it up again. If you want to see these ear tips again, just search on Taobao or AliExpress or a retailer of your choice, Aful Salt ear tips. They are available that way. And the cable that it comes with, it's quite nice in my standards, is heavy. It holds the shape well, and it also supports the weight of the IEMs. And the P5+2 or the P7 is also a very nice looking set. So there you have it. This is the main unboxing experience of the Aful Performer 7. So that's about it. So now that we have seen how the package looks, it's time to see how the package sounds. And believe me when I say this, I might be having a few voice cracks here and there because even at this point, I'm still trying to recover from my cold. So keeping all that aside, as usual, the review will be segmented into 3 parts: the lows, the mids, and the highs. And this time for the lows at least, I have not gone with 2 tracks in particular. I've gone with 3 tracks. One is Mariscos by Tipper, and the second one is Jocko Pastorius's Bluezette, and the third one is Limelight by Rush. So let's start with Mariscos by Tipper. In the intro of this track, there is a particular way in which the entire sound comes in, and it can be compared with how you throw a stone across a pond or a water body and the rippling effect is there. So the P7, I won't call it P5+2, come on. So the P7 in this intro, it reproduces the whole rippling effect in a very clean, precise way. And in the beginning, I could feel that this could be a very detailed set for the price, but let's hold our horses there. Let's not quickly jump into conclusions. So as the track progresses, the P7 with the bass, when it comes up, it presents it in a very potent, punchy way. Why I say potent is because the control of the decay on the P7 is quite clean, and the cutoff is at a very appropriate time. Although I feel that the attack could have been faster, but that's not really a huge problem for me because I was enjoying the track and I could feel that there is a great degree of competency from the IEM. And as the track progressed on and the bass starts being the main identity of the song, it still does not forget the accompanying other synth-like effects in this track, which I would say is fuzzy and kind of phases in and out. Just like I said in the beginning, it's rippling, but then later on it becomes like a phasey, fuzzy sound. And despite all the commotion going on, the P7 does a very good job in isolating the elements and yet bringing it all together in a very coherent format. And my only nitpick in this track is that the attack on the P7 could have been faster, but everything else, it was well isolated. Tonality, I would say it does lean towards on the warmer side, but it doesn't establish itself as an overly warm set as compared to some of its peers, like the Cranier Daybreak, for example. But yeah, overall, I would say that this is a strong start for the P7. Now let's move on to Jaco Pastorius' Blue Set. And I discovered this track very recently, and I also had a fortune to write a part of the 3-person review on the album, Truth, Liberty and Soul. And it's a very good album. I highly recommend it for audiophile listens. So picking up Blue Set, I would have to say this right out of the bat that the P7 lacked the clarity needed for Jaco's chorded intro to really have its blooming or the moment of glory, as to say, to let the stage on. But if I can side regard that, I have a very good weapon here because this track has a harmonica part, and it was also played by the best harmonica player of all time, Toots. I have forgotten the surname, but his name starts with Toots. So when Toots' harmonica starts coming in tangoing with the bass, the P7 just gets its focus right back into the train. When you have Jaco's bass come on with such potency, you need the gear to have a good degree of capabilities to let the harmonica go hand in hand with the bass, and the P7 delightfully does that. And I'm very impressed with it so far. The initially observed haze on the bass subsides to a very good extent as the track progressed, and there's a particular percussion section which starts supplementing the whole bass line. Because in this album, you don't hear Jaco's bass being the forefront, but Blue Set is one of those tracks where you hear the bass come in and out in a very dignified manner. So continuing with it, like I said, that the haze subsides as the track progressed and the percussion comes into play, and the P7 got the resonance and the whole distinction that you need to let the toms and the kicks come across alive in this track was done very well. And for the last track for the lows, Rush's Limelight. So here the P7 flexes its muscles, I would say. That's the whole coinage here. The P7 flexes its muscles in walking the line between quantity and quality, because in this track you cannot disregard Peart's drums over Geddy's bass line or the other way around. So both have to be established in the same way, and the P7 does a remarkable job at that, at least for the price bracket that it comes in. And the toms once again have a very healthy resonance to them, and notes from the bass lines are heard quite audibly. And here the perceived speed in attack is observed, which I had complained about in Mariscos. Other elements in this track have a fair degree of separation, although I could feel that the bass crowded over the cymbals across movements while the vocals remain intact. Once again, tonality leaned towards warmth, and it wasn't potent enough to actually dampen my impressions on the mix. It was delightfully warm. Timbre so far remains good and accurate, and the best part is that I heard the vocals nicely and planted in the center. So that's about it for the lows. Let's see how the mids are. Okay, so now that we have settled how the lows are, let's move on towards how the mids are. And for the mids, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. 2 tracks. One is Tool's Lateralis, and the second one is First It Give It by Queens of the Stone Age. So let's start with Lateralis. Don't mind me if I bring a few comparative points here, because it's important to this segment of the review, because I have owned I am owning a competitor of the P7, which is the Zigat Lush. And I've recently had the fortune to review the Tanjim Fola. In comparison with the Zigat Lush, this entirety of the track through the P7 sounds quite detailed, but it doesn't sound uh, as well separated as I would say how the Fola makes it sound. And this is important because we'll be talking about a breakdown later. Let me start off with the good things because the P7 is still no slouch. So first things first, guitars on this track sound heavy, and given how the tonality is coming off, which is quite balanced, I did not really perceive it to be warm, at least in this element, but it had a good amount of sparkle in its tone. Like, I wouldn't say outright that it's very bright, but it doesn't come off warm. It does stay within the balanced realm, but it skews more towards the bright intent rather than being overly warm. And they do sound very crisp, and this brings me to the vocals part, because I was expecting the crispness to extend to the vocals as well, but that's where the P7 started falling behind, literally, because the vocals on this track I felt were a bit pushed back in favor of the guitars and cymbals sounding more forward, which means that there is a slight hiccup in terms of its imaging capabilities. And continuing with that, when we reach the breakdown, when Carey starts doing his complex and mind-blowing drum rudiments and Justin starts wahing the bass out, you could feel that the P7 is still trying to keep up in terms of separation. But when I heard the same track on the Fola, I felt the Fola did a better job. Although the P7 does a better job here than the Lush. Too many jobs. Anyway, the P7 renders all the notes accurately, even through the busiest section of the track, right before the bass was out and Carey finishes his rudiments. And despite all the commotion going on, once again, the P7 does everything well in terms of separation, standalone. In terms of separation, imaging could have been mildly better. Tonality is right where it needs to be, balanced with a slight tinge of warmth on the other side, but the guitars being a bit brighter than usual. Vocals felt less weighted compared to the guitars here. So I would start observing that the P7 comes off thin across the vocals. Although it's not shouty, although it's not fatiguing, but there is a perceived level of thinness to the vocals. And let's move on to the second track. So coming to the second track, I had to loop it quite a few times to actually gauge my impressions on a firmer note regarding one element that was constantly bugging me through the previous track, and it's that the drums were coming off hollow. Don't get me wrong, it had the resonance, it had the whole perceived tonality, I would say, but there was something inexplicable about the body and the execution of those notes, which was making me scratch my head of sorts. And yes, it's confirmed that in this track the drums do come off hollow again, but all things said and done, there is a level of crispness and there is a level of distinction of the strokes of the snare on this track while maintaining timbre. And this is also my go-to track anyway to judge how timbre is. All things said and done, the timbre of this track through the P7 is actually near flawless. And the whole crispness with which the strokes were coming off, accompanied by how full the guitar sounded, it was very nice. Although, again, the nitpicks do come off that Josh Holmes's vocals were coming off thinner than expected, and they were indeed pushed back. The cymbals there were forward sounding, like the cymbals came first and the vocals came later. That's how my perception was. And the cymbals did get themselves up, dazed and confused through the chorus part of the song every time. So the P7 does do a few things well, and the P7 does have a few small cracks in its armor. So let's now see how the highs are of this IEM. So now that we are settled with the mids, let's see how the settlement goes on in the highs, and I'm choosing 3 tracks for judging the highs. One is Icarus by Patricia Barber, the second one is Take 5 by Dave Brubeck, and the third one is Stateside by Pink Panthers featuring Zara Larsson. Now that we are done with the track rundown, let's jump right through Icarus. Patricia Barber has a beautiful, lush, gorgeous texture on her vocals, and it's a hot take, but I think if you need to hear Patricia Barber at her peak beauty, you will need a certain level of gear to actually accurately reproduce the whole vocal dynamics of her. And I'm happy to say that the P7 does a wonderful job at that. The note weight and body of her vocals is adequate, tonality is balanced, and the best part about the P7 on this track is that there is no semblance of sibilance, no fatiguing points, no pierce, and even there is nothing shouty about this whole track, and that's what impresses me the most. In fact, when I heard Icarus on the P7, it has been one of the smoothest listens I have had, and smooth here does not equate that detail has been completely forgotten. There is still a great sense of detail in this track where I could feel the raspiness and the lushness of Patricia's vocals at the same time. The way the percussion tangoed with the guitars to elevate her presence throughout, and when her straight note sustain part comes in, where she stretches one note for a good time, there was no sibilance, no nothing at all. And the way the P7 handled this section was that it did not isolate her vocals from the rest of the instrumentals. It was a joint venture effort. Nothing was forgotten, nothing was abandoned. Pianos, percussion, guitars, vocals, everything sounded one, and everything sounded themselves at the same time. So this level of cohesion from an IEM is sometimes not expected even at the price range and the advancements made, but the P7 does a fabulous job at that. Then we move on to Take 5 by Dave Brubeck. And in this track, cymbals right in the beginning come off slightly thinner than expected. And this is what pisses me off slightly about the Aful P7. See, if you want to be good at something, be consistent in your efforts. And if you want to be bad at something, still be consistent with your efforts. At least I would be like, okay, this IEM is bad at this department, end of story. But the inconsistency of the P7 makes me say certain redundant things all over the review. I'll link the text review down across in the extension. But anyway, the P7 comes off inconsistently thin. And I didn't find the pianos in this track to be as thin as the cymbals were, but there was still some degree of affectation about in that department. And when the horns come in, that's when my delight starts, because the horns are displaying a fabulous control in timbre, and it's as natural as you can get. And tonality here is still leaning mildly towards warmth, but it's not very overpowering the entire sound. If some ears feel that the P7 is balanced, then they won't be wrong. And if the P7 and in certain section of the P7 listeners or users feel that it is still warm, again they won't be wrong. For me, it was neither warm nor balanced. It was a mixture of both. Anyway, while the pianos also came off with good timbre, there was a mild degree of thinness to their note weight and body. And however, the P7, when the drum section comes in, and this is a rather unique drum section in this track, where the whole channel separates and you are hearing both sides at the same time across both of your ears. The P7 again presents the mix in a very cohesive manner. The resonance and the impact of the snares, the floor toms, and the kicks are well preserved and presented accurately. And before I forget to mention, let me talk about the perceived stage on this IEM. As controversial as it may sound, actually IEMs do not really have stage, but again, psychoacoustics are at play. So when it comes to the perceived stage on this IEM, it is nothing to write home about. It's fairly ordinary. It doesn't make the instruments sound very claustrophobic. The instruments themselves, along with vocals or whatever elements that the tracks might have, they are well spaced and that remains consistent throughout. There is a decent degree of width that I had heard, but it's not very high or deep. Like I said, it's ordinary. So the last track, Stateside by Pink Panthers, featuring Zara Larsson, both vocalists are being thin by default, and the P7 consistently manages to make them thinner in perception. However, this doesn't affect the sense because the track has a very funk style bass and synth presentation, and both elements come off quite non-distorted and very clear, I would say. The synth especially, it was not really confusing itself as the beats pulsated through. And I must say that there is an element of the of a particular beat coming off like claps, and they do sound as thin as the vocals on this track, which is another disappointment for me. However, the synths are very well separated from the vocals. There is no degree of confusion there, although some more polish would have made the track even more enjoyable. And timbre is established beyond reasonable doubt that it is going to be accurate no matter what you throw at it. And tonality, for the final time, it's neutral one, I would say. Yeah, that's the perfect way to put the whole impression tonality. It's neutral one. So that's about it for the sound of the P7. Let's move over to the concluding notes. Okay, so to conclude the review of the P7, it's going to be very short. I would like to go to the comparisons first. If I were to compare it with sets like the Tanjim Fola, which I once again have had the fortune of reviewing, I think, and along with the Zigat Lush, I think we are in a conundrum of sorts because all of these three IEMs are quite similar sounding, and they do have their strengths and weaknesses. So if you want a fuller, stronger bass presentation as well as the quantity to go with it, I think the P7 would be better than the Lush and the Fola. If detail and separation is what you're looking for, then the Fola would be better than the 2. And if you're looking for an overall laid-back set with damn smooth highs and beautiful texture of vocals through and through, the Lush would be the better pick amongst the two. But please be warned, it has been reported that certain batches of the Lush have driver flex in them. Even my personal unit does. But keeping that aside, even if you choose either of them, you won't be going wrong. But if I were to compare it against something like the 7Hz Divine or the Cranial Daybreak, then the P7 comes as a much more polished set than both of them. Because Divine to me sounded quite bloated and incoherent, where it didn't know what to do with it, which is a shame because it's the same company that made planar legends like the 7Hz Timeless and the Timeless 2. So hearing the Divine was a massive disappointment for me. There was nothing divine about that IEM. And the P7, while compared to the Daybreak, comes off like a gentleman. The Daybreak does have its strengths and also it has its weaknesses, mainly because it comes off quite sibilant and the bass can come off bloated. Not to mention the QC issues that you often see on Reddit and similar forums about the Daybreak. So if I were to be buying a certain IEM, then I would be getting the P7 over both of them. To conclude, a very strong attempt from Aful, which can be said as successful. It's a jack of all trades and a master of most of them. The nitpicks that I talked about, they can be fixed by EQ or ear tips. And two important questions, like as usual in my reviews, would I buy this set at retail? Absolutely. Will I buy this set used? Give it a listen. If you like it, it's a blind buy recommendation from me. Aful actually knocked it out of the park with the P7 given the price point that it comes in. And in sales where you can grab a handful of AliExpress coupons or any coupon that your local audio retailer might provide for the P7, grab it and just order it. The package itself is so good, and the P7 overall, once again, is a wonderful set and it earns a strong recommendation from my end. So that's it for the P7 review. I'll be back again next time with my dog, who would be reviewing another set, a favorite set of mine together with me. So stay well, stay hydrated, and that's it. See you later.